Hello everyone, I'm Shubham Thakur and this is another episode of podcast on CBAM by Cleancarbon.ai, which focuses on understanding and dissecting everything about carbon border adjustment mechanism, a climate policy to prevent carbon leakage and create a level playing field for businesses across the world and particularly for businesses inside European Union Commission. I'm Shubham Thakur. I'm sustainability expert and CBAM expert, also a climate journalist. Today, we have two important guests from Center for Social and Economic Progress, CSACP. It's a think tank, a reputed think tank in India, which has recently published a paper called Assessing the Distributional Implications of EU's CBAM on India. It's a CGE analysis. It's basically unpacking of CBAM, how it is going to impact Indian iron and steel sector and Indian economy when we look at it in terms of trade and businesses. We have Mr. Joydeep Ghosh, sir, and Rajat Verma ji. Both of them have years of experience. They have looked CBAM closely and they have been a well-known climate policy analyst, expert on CBAM, trade expert, both national and international. Thank you so much, sir, Joydeep sir and Verma sir, for agreeing to do this interview. And let's unpack this complicated policy, which is just, it's like a big pain for most of the businesses and, traders in India. Also for importers in European Union Commission, because we all know it's very complicated. So through your study, which I have had a chance to look at, I saw that it put much of emphasis and focus on understanding the financial implications on Indian economy. How is CBAM going to impact suppliers and the Indian economy once we enter definitive regime, which starts from January 2026? This is for Joydeep sir and Verma sir also, because I know because there are two different insights going to come from both of you. So I think Joydeep sir can take the first.
Okay. Thank you, Shubham. Very nice to meet you, and thank you for this invitation. So, CBAM is a focus area for our research, and we got interested in this work as part of as part of our interest in knowing
Yeah.
the implications of CBAM for the economy, for the Indian economy especially. And through our work, we basically want to share our views on this topic, and to basically make people understand what it means. So as far as the impacts are concerned, there could be definitely some impact on the economy, as we have seen through our study. So again, a little bit about our study. It's a modeling based study. So basically, we have a macroeconomic model of the economy, and then we try to, what we say, create different scenarios with the help of the model. Okay, so this helps us to analyze, what may happen, to the economy. So as we know, CBAM is especially, applicable for the carbon, energy-intensive trade-exposed sectors such as iron and steel, cement, aluminium, and so on. And India exports, a substantial amount to the European Union. Although as a share of GDP, it's quite small, but still, these major industries are exposed, and in turn, they could have repercussions throughout the economy, because so that is the intention. And of course, we find that there are some negative impacts, although they are quite small, but still there are some negative impacts on the economy. And but again, how it is, how we can overcome these challenges, that needs to be seen.
Yeah.
So maybe Rajat can say something,
So
more add to this.
So now coming to Mr. Rajat, so I've seen the study, and there are some numbers that we have come out through the study. If I could ask you in terms of percentage or the statistics, how do you think CBAM is going to impact Indian economy and particularly iron and steel sector in India, who supply to European Union Commission?
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Shubham, and let me compliment Dr. Joydeep here. What he said was absolutely correct that, we will see some marginal impacts on the GDP and which ranges from 0 to 0.03% of the GDP 2026 onwards, because that's when the policy is going to be implemented. That's on the Indian economy. And so, as he said that, we have also modeled three scenarios. Let me quickly talk about these three scenarios. One is a scenario where there is just CBAM and India is not responding to it.
Okay.
Second is there is just domestic carbon pricing policy, that is a domestic carbon tax on the EIT sectors in the India. And third is a combination of these two
Hmm.
at 50% rate. As you know that the rate at which this export tax is going to be levied or this tax is going to be levied will be the differential price between what is levied in India versus that is levied in the EU emissions trading scheme. So that is what we have modeled, and that is what has resulted into a 0.20 to 0.03% negative impact on the GDP. Now, in this third scenario, which is a combination scenario, what we have found is that because the revenue is retained by the government of India, due to P carbon, which is a domestic carbon tax, which is levied on these carbon emissions in trade and exposed sectors. So there's a 0.5% of the GDP revenue which can be retained by the government of India. And once that is plugged in, so the expenditure, there could be slight positive impacts, and that's how you fight for it. Okay. And on in terms of fertilizer exports, slightly get increased. However, if there is an overall negative impact. CBAM induced price increases leads to a decline in the household consumption, with
Hmm.
urban household experiencing a higher burden due to their greater reliance on the carbon emissions intensive industries. So that's what we see on the overall in terms of numbers in the Indian industry.
No, so this number that you have thrown, which is 0.6, if I heard you correctly, how much will it be in terms of financial implications, like in billions or millions for the Indian sector,
Uh,
steel sector?
Well, yeah, so it's 0.03% of the India's GDP, and that would, so 1% of $2 trillion economy, which India is kind of had hit sometimes back, would be what? 1% of it, so far lesser than that.
Hmm.
So, something on that level one can see in terms of its impact.
So I was reading somewhere, and it's a credible study which says that we have about 13 billion worth of export trade relation with the European Union Commission, and majority of it comes from iron and steel sector, and the volume is also very high. We export a lot of steel to European Union Commission. If I could ask you in terms of sector-wise impact, the paper also says that it is going to be the iron and steel sector. The 90% of the impact on CBAM is going to be from iron and steel sector. What are your thoughts on that? How do you think it is going to impact deeply, and what it means for the businesses, for steel exporters?
Uh, okay. So let me try to answer this. This is a little bit complicated question. Okay. So you have to think in terms of how the firms will respond
Mm.
to such a policy. Okay. You have to understand how the market works. Okay. So again, that is, you have to understand. So basically, if a company has low carbon intensity, okay, then in general, it is at an advantage compared to other firms,
Okay.
in the industry or even in other industries. Okay. So, in my view, it is, not very clear that which sector will get most affected as such. Okay. So, for example, if the iron and steel industry, for example, they do some very good job, they try to, reduce their carbon intensity by a huge amount, they might not be affected at all, right?
But
So
sir,
that could be yeah, or there could be very little impact compared to, let's say, the aluminium sector that doesn't invest in, reducing the carbon intensity. So you have to think from that perspective. What is the carbon intensity of the firm, especially the farm or the industry, and its exposure to the European market? If a firm doesn't have any exposure to the European market, then again, it is not affected by CBAM.
Mhm.
So all these things you have to consider while answering this question: which sector or which firm will be affected by CBAM?
But sir, if we look at, for example, iron and steel sector of India and CBAM, now when we talk about CBAM, it's not just European Union Commission. It's a matter of time when Canada, Australia, and other countries are going to have CBAM. UK already is in the process, which is going to introduce from 27, if it all goes well. In such a context, when the world itself is moving and becoming climate conscious, how do you think Indian steel sectors can cope up with this? Why I'm asking this, sir, is because Indian iron and steel sector is one of the most carbon intensive sectors. You do not have accurate and credible data collection methods and infrastructure. The production methods and routes are very different and highly dependent on coal and other methods of production, most of which are very carbon intensive in nature. Now, if you come up with CBAM and then say, if you want to export this product to this part of the world, this is the policy that you need to comply with. Do you think they need more time? Putting this in context, and also the paper says that we should have our own domestic carbon pricing mechanism, which will reduce the burden to an extent because the revenue will be kept here and it will not outflow to European Commission through taxes. In such a context, sir, how and what do you think can be done by steel sector to cope up with CBAM? Verma, sir, if you could take that.
Yeah, thank you. Let me also, begin answering this question by taking a lead from Dr. Joydeep. So what he mentioned was that, it really depends on the firm and the industry as such as together. But what if the industry do not, enhance their technological innovations? If that happens, that's what our part of the study answers it. In fact, the sector which gets highest hit is actually the coal sector.
Okay.
And Shubham, you did mention that in your delivery that coal intensive iron and steel production is already there, which is a blast furnace technology or
Yeah.
even DRI for that matter, uses or depends on the coal a lot. Now, when the relative prices get shot up due to the CBAM, it's also the inputs which gets impacted due to low production and the
Mm.
exports of these sectors going to the EU, right? And so therefore, it is the coal sector which gets impacted the most. Post that, iron and steel and aluminium, marginal differences there in the term when the technological innovations are possibly not happening, but there's a substitution happening between the iron and steel, say producing not only iron and steel for that matter in the entire economy, shifting away from polluting sources such as coal towards renewable electricity generation, such as solar, wind, etc. Right. So that kind of substitution is also which is a possibility which we see to happen due to the CBAM, which is a good news, frankly,
Mm.
for a country like that of India, where the impact is not that high, and there's a shift towards the renewable, electricity generation
So in,
due to CBAM.
yeah, so in fact, it's so if I'm right in understanding you, sir, it's a method which is going to push the industries in India towards decarbonization, and not just iron and steel,
Absolutely,
but other countries like coal. Okay.
absolutely.
So before I come to understand how it is changing businesses and trade patterns for Indian suppliers and globally, let us first address this important question. If I could ask both of you, what are the biggest challenges for Indian suppliers? and businesses under the CBAM. The biggest, due to which they're not able to comply with CBAM. Is it the policy is very technical in nature? Is it data collection a challenge? Or they do not have a proper infrastructure, or the data credibility? What do you think are the biggest challenges?
Yeah. So let me begin by saying that industrial decarbonization is difficult. Okay. There are very few technologies at scale that that could be implemented at scale. Okay. So note this, that industrial decarbonization is a difficult path, and India needs to embark on that path. Okay. And what say Indian industry is as such prepared to some extent, because we already have the PAT scheme, performance and achieve target scheme, PAT scheme. So these energy intensive industries are part of that scheme. So they do have, understanding of, let's say, reporting and, buying and selling of allowances, or carbon credits. They have an understanding of how this system might work. But then again, carbon pricing is totally different from the buying and selling of energy emission energy certificates. So you have to keep that in mind. And so basically, it's a long process, I would say. We are just beginning this process. Emissions trading came into force in the European Union in 2005.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are, if you see it that way, we are already 20 years behind. As far as carbon pricing is concerned. So we are just beginning this journey, but I am sure Indian industry will pick up on this, and there is a lot of innovation going on. And as I said, from my perspective, infrastructure is a major challenge. Because for industrial decarbonization, you need a lot of infrastructure, and for that, policies are also likely to play an important role. So we need policies specifically to create that infrastructure that would help in industrial decarbonization. So all these things, both infrastructure and policy, in my view, are very important.
What do you think, sir?
Yeah, just to add to that, apart from the policies and the infrastructure being a challenge, I would also add accounting as one of the major challenge, for the Indian industry, where, data reporting may not happen properly, appropriately, and with challenges comes opportunities. You would see that there are already firms existing in India which have tried to capture this as a capitalize on such an issue, and they are already providing consultancy supports to these industries for data accounting in terms of embedded carbon. That there are positive effects of these kind of shifts which are already happening. And just to add on to this challenge as an opportunity is that there are already some inward pressure on EU to give back the revenue collected to the developing countries. And EU is already thinking of giving back it to the developing countries. And if that happens, then that revenue can actually be used to accelerate the decarbonization. Right. And even when and following the CBD thing, that is the common but differentiated responsibility, right? Because understand, and the other challenge is, I think, the price, because it took, as Dr. Joydeep mentioned, it took 10 years for EU ETS to graduate and develop into a system which can generate revenue by trading its certificates. And India is starting in next year, right, with the CCTS, where the design is not proper. We are moving from PAT to CCTS, not to ETS regime. What is the difference between CCTS and ETS? The basic difference is that emissions are not capped. It is the emissions intensity which is capped, which might be important for developing countries such as India. That's a separate story, that's a separate argument. But then what I'm trying to say is that it is different than what ETS is, and therefore a domestic carbon tax might actually play a different role in it. And that's what we modeled in this paper, right? And try to see that how much revenue it can generate and which is actually beneficial. We come to a conclusion that it's actually the P carbon plus CBAM scenario. That is a mix and match of CBAM along with the domestic carbon tax, which actually plays a benefited role in terms of a solution to CBAM,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
And in terms of acceleration towards decarbonization along with revenue generation, because we cannot rely on EU alone, right? On
Absolutely.
whether the revenue will come or come back or not. Right?
No, I mean, it's also, as you said, it's also about data collection. So why should anyone share all the data with one institution? It has to be democratized.
Yes, yes, yes.
So now we'll shift our focus on understanding how it is changing business and trade patterns. Now, there have been cases, and many experts are saying that, as Joydeep sir also mentioned, that the company or institution which is going to decarbonize faster and earlier is going to be at the beneficial point, advantageous point, and that's rightly so. Do you think it is going to change the trade patterns itself in the sense that you were exporting iron and steel or any CBAM covered goods to European Union Commission, but now, since unfortunately you do not have the relevant data, you will find another importers which are not part of European Union Commission, maybe in Middle East or US or any other part of the country or the world. Another argument is that if you are doing it nicely, you will have more market share because you could capture the market share left by someone who has not been so active and pro at CBAM compliance. How do you see this changing the trade patterns, sir?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. Yeah, but as you said, the European market is very lucrative.
Mhm.
Okay. And, to put it bluntly, moving away from such a market is not good for any company. Okay. So, it is not a good decision, I would say. So, to be in the EU market, you have to decarbonize. Okay. So then again, as I mentioned before, other things come into the picture. So if you are able to decarbonize, you can, maintain your market share in the EU, and even you might be able to perform better, because if other companies are not able to innovate or decarbonize, some companies might get an advantage in the
Yeah.
EU market. That's one point. But again, as far as trade patterns are concerned, two things might happen. I mean, that comes to my mind is that the companies that are not able to decarbonize, they might move to other markets.
Yeah.
Okay. And not necessarily, Western countries, but other markets. And the second is, other countries might capture the EU market. For example, countries in Africa, they are very close to Europe, geographically. So, for example, in a scenario, if African countries develop their infrastructure and they put up steel mills over there near the European Union, then, they will get an advantage. So, in that sense, trade patterns might shift. So it might, you have other markets for Indians or for India, or, the European market could be captured by other countries.
Absolutely. So I have two questions and we have about 7 minutes. So that's what I'm saying. So first question, sir, is that how CBAM is going to lead to carbon pricing, like inflated prices for products. If you're going to pay in terms of penalty or carbon tax, like CBAM tax, it's a way of tax, where are you going to recover that amount? So is the consumer going to see or witness prices spike in Europe and in India also? As you said, household incomes factor comes in. Verma, sir?
Yeah, so that is absolutely an important question, and I agree to it that that this may lead to a price shift and price increase, and which is what we also find. But one also has to understand, and here my hunch is that consumers in India will be impacted due to the oversupply and higher relative prices of the sector. And consumers in the EU, on the other hand, would already be facing a brunt of the decreasing emissions cap, which is leading to a higher prices of these commodities. And then, there are external, situations such as war, which is already
Yeah.
going through,
And then
which
the
will
tariffs also, sir. The tariff war.
tariffs as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely, the tariff war, which US is playing with most of these countries, right? So this is a hard situation we are into, and we are into a situation where trade is increasingly getting, more nationwide approach, and trade is curtailed in terms of through some or the other measure. But one needs to see that, that CBAM as a measure has supported the EU suppliers.
Mm.
Okay. And that is certainly the case, even though they are calling it as a carbon leakage reduction policy scenario. But one needs to also understand that they are protecting their industries in some way or the other. Right. So therefore, the EU suppliers are at a better, relatively better situation as compared to the EU consumers, for sure.
I think, sir, you're right, sir. I think they have come up with some feedback or some kind of policy, not policy, but some document which says that they are going to support the offset mechanism of importers and suppliers impacted by CBAM in European Union Commission by compensating for the losses. I think it's a recent document that has been published by them. So now I have 5 minutes left and one question. How do you think technology is going to play its role in accurate CBAM compliance and sustainability reporting? Well,
Okay. So as far as technologies are concerned, as I said, they are very important. And in my view, I mean, two technologies come to my mind. First is carbon capture and storage, and the second is hydrogen, green hydrogen based
mhm.
steel making. But again, in terms of costs, they are very expensive at this point, and you need a lot of infrastructure to implement these technologies at scale. So government support is very important.
Yeah.
But in my view, without government support, the implementation of these costly technologies would be very difficult. So that is one point. And what was the second one? What?
So I think you made it point, made it. That is what my question was. Sir, same goes for you. Verma, sir, you have 1 minute. I'm so sorry.
Okay, brilliant. No, no issues. So, just to add to this, point of Dr. Joydeep, an estimation which I'm going to give you is not for the CCUS or CCS, but there such as inert anode technology, which can be implemented in aluminium. So, and the literature shows that it is going to cost you around 1.3 lakh crore to decarbonize the sectors such as iron and steel,
Wow.
cement, and aluminium. Okay, just these three industries in India over the period of 5 years. But there's a solution. There's
Okay.
something called as Clean Environment Cess, which raises approximately 51,000 crore rupees annually. Okay, which also can be used apart from a domestic government. That's it. Thank you.
Sir, in bullets, if I could ask, how can Indian suppliers counter CBAM? Just in 2 points. Verma, sir, 2, 3 points. First is domestic
I
pricing.
think yes, absolutely. Domestic pricing is important. Finding new markets.
And development is very important for producing better products or environment friendly products. So I think companies should definitely focus on R&D.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir, to Verma sir and Joydeep sir. I hope we have covered all the important aspects of CBAM and the study and how it is going to impact Indian suppliers and change economy and the way businesses are done. So the answer is plain and simple. Faster you decarbonize, better you are positioned in terms of doing trade and business with not just European Union Commission, but other countries globally, since we know that many countries are coming up with similar CBAM-like mechanism. We might also have something related to CBAM, nothing official, but we have to wait and watch. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining for this insightful conversation.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.